Near the close of the 1500s, an Englishman named John White set out across the Atlantic. He was bound for Roanoke Island off the southeastern coast of North America. 3 years earlier, he had helped establish an English settlement there, and now he was returning to take up his role as governor once more. After a harsh and exhausting voyage, White finally reached the colony's location. What he found was shocking. The more than 100 settlers he had left behind, men, women, and children, were gone, vanished without explanation. One of the only traces left behind was a word carved into a tree. Before White could organize a deeper search, the ship that had carried him across the ocean departed for England again, leaving the mystery unresolved. What became of the lost colony of Roanoke? To understand the disappearance, we need to look at what happened before it. The story really begins in 1584. 2 English ships crossed the Atlantic to scout a location for what would become England's first permanent colony in America. By mid-July, they arrived at a chain of barrier islands known today as the Outer Banks. The English formed friendly connections with nearby Native American communities and were invited to visit a village on Roanoke Island. After spending roughly a month exploring the region, the expedition sailed back to England in September. The man overseeing the venture, Walter Raleigh, quickly moved to organize a permanent settlement. Soon after, Queen Elizabeth I knighted him. The new territory would be called Virginia, in tribute to the Virgin Queen. In April 1585, 7 ships left England, carrying about 600 men and supplies meant to last roughly a year. By late June, they reached the Outer Banks, but trouble followed almost immediately. The waters there were dangerous and shallow. When the flagship attempted to pass through an inlet, it struck a shoal and was nearly wrecked. Because the flagship carried most of the supplies, and many were ruined by seawater, plans had to change. Instead of the large settlement originally intended, only about 100 men remained on Roanoke Island. With the consent of the local native population, they began constructing what would become the Roanoke colony. The island had strategic advantages. It allowed quick access to the Atlantic, while remaining hidden from Spanish patrols. Spain had already claimed much of the territory England now called Virginia, so avoiding attention was essential. A second shipment of provisions was expected before winter. However, unknown to the settlers, Queen Elizabeth had redirected that mission to handle more urgent matters in England. When food ran low, the colonists depended heavily on local tribes. At first, this worked, but the Native Americans had limited resources themselves. As English demands increased, tensions grew. Around this time, something else alarming began to happen. Whenever Englishmen visited native villages, many inhabitants soon fell ill and died. The tribes believed the newcomers possessed invisible weapons that could kill from afar. In a way, they were right. The English unknowingly carried diseases to which the indigenous population had no immunity. Epidemics spread rapidly. Relations deteriorated further between Ralph Lane, the colonial governor, and Wingina, a native leader. Suspicion replaced cooperation. Wingina withdrew his people from Roanoke to a larger mainland settlement. Lane became convinced that Wingina was forming alliances to attack the colony. On the 1st of June, 1586, Lane and his men struck first. They attacked the mainland village and killed many of its inhabitants. Wingina himself was captured and beheaded. His head was later displayed outside the English fort. A week afterward, a large English fleet, led by Sir Francis Drake, passed through the region. With food scarce and violence escalating, the colonists decided to abandon Roanoke. After 9 difficult months, they returned to England. All except 3 men, who were left behind by accident and never seen again. The 1,585 colony had failed. Food shortages, broken alliances, and unmet hopes of finding gold or copper had doomed it. Yet one man was determined to try again, John White. White was an artist by profession. Many of the maps and sketches from these expeditions came from his hand. Ironically, no portrait of White himself survives. His exact role in earlier voyages is debated. He may have participated in the 1584 scouting trip and certainly joined the 1585 expedition. Historians disagree on whether he stayed in the colony or returned home with the fleet. Eventually, Raleigh agreed to attempt a second settlement. This time, it would not be just a military outpost. Families would come too, including White's pregnant daughter, Eleanor Dare. After much effort to secure funding, 3 ships sailed in late spring 1587 under White's leadership. He would serve as governor. The troubles of Roanoke did not end with the evacuation in 1586. Shortly afterward, a supply ship sent by Raleigh reached the island. Finding no colonists, it returned home. 2 weeks later, another fleet arrived and found the settlement deserted as well. Before leaving, its captain left 15 men behind to hold the site. When John White's fleet approached in July 1587, he intended to check on those men. However, the second colony was not supposed to be at Roanoke at all. The plan was to establish the city of Raleigh near Chesapeake Bay, where waters were deeper and the land more suitable. But the fleet's navigator, Simão Fernandes, ignored those instructions. More experienced at sea than White, he carried significant influence. Instead of continuing north, he left the colonists at Roanoke. White did not oppose him. Upon arrival, they found no sign of the 15 men. Only bones remained, likely from one of them. Soon after, a colonist named George Howe was killed by native warriors. Still, the English were not entirely without allies. 2 native men, Wanchese and Manteo, had previously traveled to England. Wanchese returned resentful of the English, while Manteo maintained friendly ties. Through Manteo, White learned that a coalition of tribes had attacked the 15 men, led by Wanchese. Some were killed. The rest escaped by boat and disappeared. Concerned about survival, the colonists urged White to return to England for supplies. He hesitated, worried about accusations of desertion and about leaving his daughter, who had just given birth to a child named Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America. Eventually, he agreed. In August 1587, White departed. He would never see them again. White's return to England coincided with rising tensions and the threat of Spanish invasion. Ships were held back by royal order. 3 years passed before he secured passage back to America in 1590. When he reached Roanoke in August, smoke was visible rising from the island. Landing parties found footprints and, carved into a tree, the letters C-R-O. At the entrance to the settlement stood a post engraved with the full word, Croatoan. The colony was abandoned, buildings dismantled, chests looted, no bodies, no boats. Before leaving in 1587, White had arranged that if the settlers relocated, they would carve their destination. A cross would indicate distress. No cross was found. Croatoan, an island to the south, seemed the logical answer. White intended to sail there immediately, but a storm damaged the ship's anchor. Without a replacement, the captain refused to continue. White returned to England. Some believe the colonists simply moved to Croatoan and assimilated with friendly tribes. Yet White also wrote that they had planned to move 50 miles into the mainland. Croatoan was an island, not the mainland. The detail introduces doubt. Years later, stories emerged from the Jamestown colony established in 1607. Powhatan reportedly told John Smith of Europeans living inland. These claims were never confirmed. Later accounts described native people with gray eyes or lighter features. Others spoke of tribes claiming descent from white ancestors who could read. In the early 1700s, explorer John Lawson met the Hatteras tribe. They occupied what had once been Croatoan. Some members had gray eyes and claimed English ancestry. Lawson believed they were descendants of the Lost Colony. Centuries passed without decisive proof. In the 1930s, inscribed stones allegedly written by Eleanor Dare surfaced. Most were proven fraudulent. The first stone remains debated. Modern archaeology has uncovered English artifacts both on Roanoke and Hatteras, but nothing conclusively tied to the missing settlers. In 2011, researchers examining White's map noticed concealed patches. Under one patch, minor corrections. Under another, a faint four-pointed star, a symbol for a fort, located roughly 50 miles inland. This site, dubbed Site X, may mark a planned relocation point. Excavations have found pottery fragments and metal pieces suggesting English presence. Still, no definitive evidence. If the colonists divided, one group may have moved inland towards Site X, while another joined the Croatoans. Drought conditions at the time could have forced relocation. Over decades, intermarriage may have erased clear distinctions. The mystery persists. Were they absorbed into native communities? Did some attempt to sail home and perish? Was Site X ever built? Without stronger evidence, certainty remains out of reach. But if an answer exists, it may still lie buried in the soil, waiting to be uncovered.